Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Filatara. Welcome to my channel. So today we're going to have a look at what I call my underdog decks. And by underdog, I mean decks that somehow I tend to overlook and I tend not to use them as much, or I tend not to appreciate as much, or perhaps I used to use them a lot and then I just don't reach out for them anymore. But in any case, those are the decks that I still, for some reason, think that they do have a place in my collection, but I don't necessarily use as much as I should. But before we start, I just have fantastic news. So starting from the 1st of December, which is coincidentally today, I've actually activated my membership program. So I'm so very excited about this because this will give me an opportunity to be even more in touch with the tarot community and get to do things that I really love and be with the people that I really appreciate. So check it out. It's on the membership tag on the channel. I also posted a couple of explanation, let's say, or division, in tiers where I show you all of the packs. But basically there's going to be a lot more videos. It's divided in 3 tiers. The first tier is just a supportive tier, in the sense that there will be more contact, in the sense that you will receive a very special badge, and thanks to that badge I will immediately know in the comments, for example, or in the live chats, that you are one of my members. You will receive more attention, and you will also be allowed, invited actually to be part of a new Facebook page that is going to be created as soon as I have enough members. So at the time I'm speaking, I've obviously just activated this membership program and I don't have any member yet, which is absolutely fine because I understand that it takes time. But I needed to start somewhere and I'm actually very excited about it. So check it out if you're interested. All the 3 levels are very affordable. The second one, is probably, I think, is going to be the most popular one because it does come with a lot of perks, and namely there's going to be a lot of videos, a lot of readings, and also it comes with the second and the third tier comes with a free Wheel of the Year 2024 reading, private one from me. So have fun, and don't forget to reach out to me at my email address, or even here in the comments below if you want any kind of further explanation on the membership. But without much further ado, let's have a look at these decks. So the first deck I want to talk about today as an underdog deck in my collection is an oracle deck rather than a tarot deck, and it's this one here. I just want to show you the backs, how beautiful they are. These are backs that are just as beautiful as the front. I should do a tag on that because sometimes I really appreciate the fact that the creators put as much effort, in creating these backs. Look how beautiful, lots of symbols there. There's a very dreamy kind of atmosphere, but it also tells you a bit of a theme that is what this deck is about, because it is the Oracle of the Novice Witches. I am not entirely sure, but I think I've seen this one out for a couple of months, a few months. I was lucky enough that I found a copy when I was traveling back in July, August, so it's been out for at least, I would say, 6 months, if not longer, but it is definitely from this year. Now, due to weight reason and space reason in my suitcase, I unfortunately had to take the box out and just ship this one back to me with the book, but without the box, so I can't show you the box. Sorry about that. It's a very beautiful one. Just to show you, what do we have here? We've got a few cards. We've got the very nice, very evocative, but also very stylized kind of artwork. And we got the name of the character, so this is Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, and we've got a let's say a keyword that looks into the personality of the character that is depicted on the card, and then it sums it up more or less with this keyword. I would have gone with esotericism or occultism because this is what Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky is famous for, obviously, but I really do believe that Fraternity actually covers it as well. And then we got, of course, Merlin with Imagination, Biddy Early with Nature, Hecate with Initiation, Starhawk, and so on. So Matteuccio Dottori was an Italian witch from, I think, if I'm not wrong, was the 1600. I could be wrong. So I think that this deck, when I got it, I was very enthusiastic about it. I used it all the time. As I said, I was away, so it was one of the decks that whenever I was packing, I was always making sure that it ended up in the day pack or the purse or the, you know, the backpack that I was carrying with me, because I didn't want it to go in the suitcase. I wanted to be, you know, able to reach out for it and find it every time that I wanted to have a look at it. So we also have, we not only have characters, but as you can see, we also have you know, witches familiars, but we also have symbols, the knife, the grimoire, and then we go back to the Gandalf, the wizard. So as I was saying, I used it all the time at the beginning, and I had some really nice conversation with this deck. I really appreciated what it was giving me. I love reading the book, but at a certain point in our journey together, I just didn't feel like, you know, using it anymore. And I don't know whether it's related to the fact that it's a very specific art style that, if I think about my collection, I don't necessarily find any other deck to pair it with. And therefore, as you probably, and if you watch my channel, you'll know I love Baba Yaga. If you watch my channel, you'll know that when I cannot pair up an oracle deck with a tarot deck, I tend not to use oracle decks on their own, with a very few exceptions. So it kind of ends up being, you know, relegated in the shelves, unfortunately. So this is my first example of an underdog deck. So it's the kind of deck I'm not giving enough attention to. But there is a way to bring it back to my attention, to bring it back to my routine. And it is, as I said before, to find a way, for example, to complete the meaning of its own cards with, for example, pairing it up with a tarot deck. And the tarot deck that I originally paired it with is the Barbara Walker Tarot. I do believe that is still the best tarot deck to be paired up with this oracle deck in specific, because it's not just, let's say, the artwork that really vibes together, but it's also the fact that this oracle will definitely help you kind of softening the blow of the Barbara Walker Tarot. And yes, indeed, the size is not exactly the same. We know that the Barbara Walker is a tarot that is now in a tin. There used to be a full-size tarot available. I think that it's not in print anymore, and it's actually rather difficult to find. But if you do have it, I highly recommend trying and pairing it up with the Oracle of the Novice Witches, because it really feels like it's a very good match. Now, in order to not make it look like it's too big, I'm just going to level it out like that. And I'm just going to show you how good these two actually are together. I think what we can clearly see in this case is that there is a bit of a echoes and resonances, what I call like that, in between the cards. So we have more or less the same setup. Of course, we're looking at different sizes, as I said before, but we do have the same setup in the sense that we tend to have white borders, and we tend to have slightly longer borders at the top and at the bottom, whereas we have thinner ones on the sides like that. We also have cards that have a black background in both the Oracle and the Tarot deck. And then when it comes to the color palette, I have to say that even though it's not exactly the same color palette, we do have a lot of similarities. I like pairing these two up together. It's the main, what I want to achieve, let's say, my main goal when I have these two and invite them in to have a conversation is to be able to soften the blow of the Barbara Walker Tarot. Why? Because it is a very direct deck. If you have this deck, you'll know what I mean. It's a deck that is quite literally slapping you in the face with whatever message it's got for you. If you don't listen and if you try and cheat and, you know, shuffle the cards again and pull them out again, you will get more or less the same type of reading. It is one of those decks. We have to accept they exist. We have to accept they have these very important messages that they want to deliver to us. And we also have to accept that sooner or later we'll have to listen to them. Because otherwise, let me tell you, what happens is that if we turn our head, the message from this tarot deck is going to become more and more and more intense. And so I really discourage, you know, people who use this deck to actually just, you know, closing an eye and pretending that it's not speaking to us, because this deck definitely is. Now, one thing you can do if this is a bit unsettling, is definitely use it in combination with this oracle deck. So we've got, for example, the Ten of Swords, which is the lowest of the low. You hit rock bottom, you have been stabbed, but not just stabbed, you have been overstabbed. We always talk about the fact that the Ten of Swords is an overkill, but you don't need 10 swords to kill a man. I mean, obviously, when you hit a vital organ, after that, that's pretty much it. But if you want to keep on stabbing the poor thing, it's because there's a lot behind it. It's an overkill. And because the suit of swords is the suit of the mind, and I tend to read numerologically on top of everything, to me, that's actually is a union, a fusion between learning of all of your past experiences throughout the whole suit, you know, from the Ace of Swords until the Nine of Swords, learning from that and just trying to grapple with the lesson that is hidden behind of all of these events and facts that happened. You have the ruin with the Barbara Walker Tarot. So there's always, no matter what deck you use, there's actually not that many that will show you the Ten of Swords as actual just catastrophe. There might be a ray of light. Perhaps the sky is still overcast, but the clouds are dissipating. Perhaps the person has been stabbed, has, you know, reaching out for something, for a helping hand, for example. There's always one way to look up after this really horrible thing that happened, because when you reach rock bottom, when you hit rock bottom, the only way back is up. So you can't, if you are on the bottom of something, you can't really, I mean, you can try and dig your way even further down, but it's not recommended. So in this case, Barbara Walker says, no, it's ruin. It's just ruin. You know, get over it. It's ruin. Accept it. That's another face of the Ten of Swords for me. It's over. You know, accept it. It's over. It's ruin. You've tried something. It didn't work. You have to accept everything that has happened to you. You have to make treasure of that. And that's another way to, you know, see the silver lining, I guess, on that. But the Barbara Walker, again, see that I'm trying to spin it, and Barbara Walker is still trying to, you know, rein me back in and reel me back in and tell me, no, that's not what I mean with this. Ruin is ruin. So when you have a situation like that, and the Hope card from the Oracle deck might actually tell Barbara to shut up. So no, Barbara Walker, Ten of Swords still has something that can bring you hope, that can give you hope. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and not, you know, as you keep on saying, just darkness. And regardless, I'm just trying to show you how these two decks interact with each other. It's not necessarily the way in which Barbara is actually explaining the Ten of Swords. It is certainly the way in which someone feels whenever you read the word ruin, but just for you to, we're almost there, Seven of Swords, Ten of Swords. The divine hero Mata dies bound to his pillar on a bleak sea coast, attended by the Black Cloud Priestess and her bird of doom. This version is Cuchulainn, another god-begotten a virgin-born apotheosized hero sentenced to a ceremonial death by the Celtic crown goddess Masha. Queen of the Dead, also known as Morgan, Mab, or the Banshee. Like the corresponding Ten of Spades, the card represents a nadir of fortune, evil, desolation, affliction, martyrdom, pain. Okay, to be honest with you, when I started reading, I was thinking surely it's not 100% darkness, but it actually is more than that. So it is definitely ruin. So one way, you see what I'm doing, one way of lightening up the mood of the Barbara Walker and telling her to, hey, you know, take a break, take a chill pill, Barbara, is definitely to use this deck. So there is hope, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not the light of the sun because we do not expect it. And perhaps it's a light that is actually quite conceiving. It's a light that is appealing to our intuition rather than our own eyesight, because it's not the sun, it's the moon, but it's still light. And we can still focus on that when we are in this situation. I love how these two, it's almost as if they were making fun of each other. It's almost as if the Oracle deck was saying, you know, literally to Barbara, just, you know, just chill, just chill. We've got appearance in the Five of Swords and the Eyes of God. Let's look at the mirror. The appearance, perhaps not everything looks, and everything is what it looks like. Because the Five of Swords to me is the card of manipulation and gaslighting. So perhaps someone is indeed, you know, stabbing us in the back, talking about that us behind our back and saying something nasty that is not true, but it appears to be that way. So we need to go beyond the appearance. We need to investigate and get to the truth, the core of the things, and then, you know, whatever needs to fall down has to fall down, and then we just have to move on from anything that is still strong in its foundation. And so we just go on, and I'm just thinking probably the, I don't know whether I shuffled properly the Barbara Walker, because we've got the suit of swords on the left. But in any case, this is what I mean with the combination of these two together. Thanks to the fact that I am a very enthusiastic user of the Barbara Walker, because I am very much, you know, invested, let's say, in the truth. I sometimes need to use it in combination with the Oracle of the Novice Witches, simply because it lightens up the mood, and it also makes it a bit whimsical, if you know what I mean. Sometimes we need to laugh, sometimes we need to look at things and not be so serious, because that's what life is. So this is my underdog deck, but thanks to this, I'm actually bringing it back into my current used deck lineup, and let's see what this month will be like with this deck. Another deck that is an underdog deck in my collection, because I'm not paying enough attention to it, is the Mystic Fairy Tarot. This one is by Llewellyn, and this is the, let's say, the smaller kind of box, because generally speaking, Llewellyn, I think the original version of this deck was the typical Llewellyn publication with the larger box and the larger book. This one instead is a smaller one. It's by Linda Ravenscroft, and the text is by Barbara Moore. This is an underdog deck for me. Why? Because it's a fairy deck. Now, don't get me wrong, I really like and appreciate and use fairy energy. I find it very interesting. It's something that is not completely known to me, so it's always very illuminating whenever I read something, whenever there's a new deck that enters my collection that has this kind of theme. I'm very excited about it, because I know that I will get to know something more. And this deck is really beautiful. So I really don't understand why I am not paying enough attention to it. I really don't understand why I'm not actually using it as much. So let's have a look, because it's a full bleed, no borders, which is always okay with me. It's got these kind of pastel colors, which is very in theme with fairy. Fairies to me are to be used in spring, for example, more like a European kind of spring rather than an Australian spring, because in Australia now spring is all over the place. We really don't understand what's going on. We have 3 weeks of rain and cold temperatures, and then 2 days of 40 degrees, and then we go back to 17 Celsius. So it's as I said, all over the place. But this pretty much reminds me of the original concept of spring. So when everything is blossoming back after the break that it's taken during the winter, and it's ready with so much energy and so much will to create, whether it's procreate or create, as in, you know, building bridges between the seasons and the wheel of the year. I really appreciate this kind of energy. It's something that I think resonates a lot with me. I like spring. Again, more of a European type of spring or North American kind of spring because of all the flowers, for example. But also because I have all these stories that I remember from when I was a kid. For example, in May, we used to go out after, let's say after dinner, but dinner for us kids was not as late as it was for adults. So let's say probably around 8:30, 9 p.m. Anyway, it was already dark, but not like disturbingly dark, and it wasn't really late. And, you know, everyone was still up. So if kids needed help, they could just holler for their parents and they would have come immediately. So we were left relatively alone. And what we used to play all the time, we used to sing a song in order to attract fireflies. I don't know. I've asked my Italian friends to tell me whether there's still fireflies in Italy in May, but I've got different reports back. Some of them say absolutely you can still see them, you know, and someone else who lives in the city perhaps doesn't see them as much. They're still there, but not as many. They are absolutely magical. I really do believe, you know, like Tinkerbell, fireflies are absolutely the essence of fairy magic. And so this deck reminds me so much of, you know, that song we used to sing. Everyone knows that song in Italy. And we really have this way of singing it in which we literally just calling all the fireflies to come to us. And we talk about princesses and queens and kings and, you know, and all of the beautiful things that we're going to do together. And it's a magical moment for all of us kids. And unfortunately, you know, we kind of, whenever we grow up, growing up also signifies being or letting ourselves be corrupted and losing sight of our magic because we don't do these kind of things anymore. And it will feel awkward, but sometimes I and we don't have fireflies in Australia. I did see them a lot, for example, in Ampawah, which is close to Bangkok. And it was amazing. And there were so many, there were thousands and thousands that it was, it looked like they were, you know, decorating all of the trees on the river as if it were Christmas trees. So it was really, really magical. So the reason why this deck is a bit of an underdog in my collection is because somehow that's what I did with this deck, everything that I always end up doing whenever I have a fairy deck in front of me. And that is using it a lot at the beginning and then using it a little bit less and then just leaving it there, gathering dust. Again, I think that if I want to bring it back into my collection, I need to find a way to rekindle, you know, this kind of love that I have for the memory that this deck brings back. And I definitely want to pair it up with Lucy Cavendish's Sisters of the Sea, which is a Blue Angel publication. I have to say this deck is technically about mermaids because Sisters of the Sea, I mean, you will imagine these are mermaids. However, what happens is that I strongly believe that this deck has got a very magical fairy or fairy magical energy to it, and also ironically a very fiery dragony kind of energy as well. And so what I always do is I actually pair it up with the Mystic Fairy, and this way not only am I appreciating the Oracle deck because, you know, in this setup the Oracle is at the center of the attention, is the one that tells you what to focus on, and how to you know, understand the message basically that this reading is telling you, is giving you. But also I really like the fact that there's this kind of interaction because of the art style, which is very similar, because of, you know, many of the elements that we see in both the decks. The color palette is very similar as well. I have to say that also the Sisters of the Sea has that kind of spring color palette, or a color palette that I identify as spring. And it's just really, really beautiful. It's a very beautiful deck. I love these scenes that, you know, you can look at as if it were a story unfolding in front of you, and listen to the story and read it, because it is indeed an act of storytelling. Us as tarot readers, we understand the message, we translate it, and then we have to retell it. We have to convey the message to the person that is listening to us. I always say that. By the way, I really love this tower. Probably because it looks, you know, up to this level, it looks very solid, and it's only the top that is actually coming out, coming down. But the rest looks very much like it's not going to. And again, I really appreciate these two together. And this is another way in which an oracle deck or a tarot deck comes to aid to an underdog deck, in which, you know, I actually rekindle to the energy of the fairy tarot, the mythic fairy tarot in this case, thanks to the fact that I find a new meaning, I find a new way to use these two together. And I really do believe that they complement the message, they complement each other, they exist in a same, if we look at the Venn diagram, they actually in the part in the middle, they really share a lot of similar energies and vibes. Let's have a look at the other decks. Another deck that is a bit of an underdog for me is this one, Divine Deco Tarot. Goethe Oparaku Egi, sorry if I mispronounced it. I believe that it's a Eastern European deck. I don't know whether it says so here. Balkan folk art and over native Albania. So yeah, Albanian background. Tarot through the art of the Balkans. I think that this deck came out a few months ago, and it is an underdog deck for me because I definitely do not pay enough attention to it. However, it did not become like the other examples that we talked about so far. That actually became an underdog deck after I had been using that for a while, and then I lost, you know, the passion for them. This one, I got it, I opened it up, I had a look at it, I admired it. I thought to myself, this is a very beautiful deck. But I kind of knew, and back me up here, do you actually feel, do you have a feel for a new deck? Like, you know when it's a deck you're not going to use? I'm very interested to know, because I don't know whether I'm the only one, I'm probably not, but I don't know whether we're in the majority or the minority. I, generally speaking, I have a feel for a deck whenever I have a new deck in my collection. I generally know in my guts whether I'm going to appreciate it, I'm going to use it a lot, or I'm just going to think that it's pretty and then I'm just going to leave it there. I kind of had that feeling when I looked at this deck for the first time. And it's not this deck's fault. This deck, these are the backs, by the way. This deck is actually an excellent production. So we got a tack box, but it's not one of those that is difficult to, the flap is difficult to get closed. It's actually fine. We got a standard tarot size. We've got, when it comes to the cardstock, it's flexible. You know, it's a bit on the thin side, but this is one of the decks that is supposed to be used every day for quick readings. And so it's absolutely fine for a deck like that. It's a mass market, it's very affordable. And let's have a look. I mean, it's borderless, which I like. The combination of color is very nice. It's obviously referring back to, so the name is Divine Deco Tarot, so that would remind me a little bit of Art Deco. However, it looks almost as if all of the characters in this deck are dancers, and so I'm thinking it might be something related to that. There's always a bit of a pose in all of the characters. It's a very gracious pose. It's something that it doesn't convey a sense of uneasiness or struggle or effort. Everything is indeed effortless. And it's also very, very beautiful. Again, there is some body diversity, there is some skin tone diversity, probably not ability diversity. I'm thinking because of the movement, which is thematic to this deck. But I'm not unhappy about, what type of characters this deck is portraying. So why am I not loving this deck as much as I should? I think it's because even though it is admittedly very beautiful, the color palette is very nice, because we've got let's say a limited but also not necessarily too limited kind of color palette. We have access to very nice and bright colors, but we don't have, let's say, extreme saturation. So, well, although we could kind of say that for these oranges here, I think that my problem with this deck is that I haven't found its own space, its own very specific space in my collection. So every single one of my favorite decks, or at least the ones that I use the most, have their own space, in the sense that if I wanted to find the replacement for those decks, I would actually have a hard time. And that's the main reason why I'm actually keeping them. Not just because I love them, of course, but because I need them for a very specific purpose. I do love this Hermit card though. It's probably one of my favorite cards in the deck. So they have their own specific purpose that would not be possible, to fulfill that with a different deck. I haven't so far found a way to collocate this deck, to use it and to honor it in a way in which I should, because I haven't found a singular unique purpose to it. So my question to you is, do you have this deck? Again, it's the Divine Deco Tarot. If you have this deck and you use it, you like it, let me know in the comments below, because I will be very interested to know if there's a way for me to actually rekindle a bit with this deck. And the next underdog deck in my collection is the Dark Angels Tarot by Luca Russo, which is Italian and an Italian creator. And this is indeed a Lo Scarabeo publication. I don't necessarily know when this deck came out. I don't think it's very recent, although I have a story with this deck. I actually purchased it for the first time a few years ago. Let's see if the guidebook says anything about the year 2021, July 21. I must have got it almost immediately because it stayed on the shelves for a while. Then I rehomed it, and then only just recently for, let's say, Halloween, I decided somehow that I really needed this deck, and I got it again. And then again, I fell into the same trap. I really convinced myself that I really liked it. And I did, I used it a lot because it is one of those kind of gothic themed decks that I really like to use around that time of the year. But somehow it fell behind again. And so I just, I want to find a way to rekindle my passion with this deck, because the concept behind it is very interesting. So if you don't know this deck, these are the Dark Angels, the Dark Angels Tarot. The Dark Angels are the angels that have actually disobeyed the creator after the world has gone to ruin. Basically, the creator turned their backs on their own creation because there was absolutely nothing else they could do about it, or to save it, let's say, to save the world, really. And the order was for every created being to just abandon it. But the Dark Angels decided to disobey the creator. Why? Because they had been on Earth and they had seen how beautiful it is, how beautiful it can be, at least. They have experienced in their own body the ways in which humans are so unpredictable and so enamored with the flesh, but also not just the fact that we are humans in the flesh, but also because we have that kind of characteristics. Hope that no one else seems to have. So we humans are the one species on the entire creation that still believes that things can go, they can redeem themselves. And dark angels were actually fascinated by that. And when everything went downhill and everyone was supposed to leave the world, this is the concept behind it. I'm not talking by personal experience or by what I think about this deck. It's literally just written in the guidebook. So these angels decided to descend once more upon Earth and stay behind and help out and try and see if anything can still be saved. So the concept is very, on the one hand, is very dark, but it also carries this message of hope, which is very, very enlightening and very powerful and intense. And that's one of the reasons why I try many, many times to use this deck and to make myself like it. But somehow, because, and I know what it is, it's because of the art style. So it's a very specific kind of art style, and for this one I'm actually going to zoom in because I need you to really see what I see. So in almost all of the cards we have two distinct kind of areas, and I'm talking about, let's say, everything that does not constitute the face of the dark angels. So everything that is not the face has got details. It's very, you can see the focus, and everything that constitutes the face is almost as if it were blurred. And I try to have a look at all of the cards, and I try to see whether it was just, me probably not focusing well. I do wear reading glasses, so obviously I always wear reading glasses when I look at the deck, unless I forget them. But that is something that I think at this point is actually kind of done on purpose. And I believe that this is the reason why I feel like I cannot actually really connect to this deck, because in my case there is a bit of a problem when there are inconsistencies in the same card. For example, in this case, you can also see that sometimes it actually switches, from the area that is actually on focus on the face of the character on the card, and the rest of the body is actually kind of blurred. So the inconsistent consistency is that we have this kind of double or doubled up kind of areas where there's some parts of the character that are on focus and some parts that are not. Or in this case, for example, these skulls on top of these sticks are not on focus and the figure it is. Or about at the back, for example, we got the lights that are still blurry. That is a little bit of a problem for me, for the way in which my brain works. It kind of needs to, I end up lifting away my attention away from the card. I end up not being able to really read it. So just to give you an example, do you remember years ago, for example, back in 2014, I think it was the year in which we were seeing a lot of TV shows that had, at least in their titles, they had that effect that was called, I think it was called miniature, in which you had only one stripe of, for example, the scene. It was maybe there was a panel. I'm thinking about House of Cards, for example. If you watched it, you will know. In the title at the beginning, you had, for example, the center of the frame that was in focus, and then the upper part and the lower part were out of focus, and that gave you the idea, almost as if the cars and the people on the out of focus part were just in miniature. So that, I believe it was called the miniature effect, and it was done by in the olden days of architecture, that would have been a very specific and very expensive lens that you needed to buy, and you could get that effect. But obviously when Photoshop came, then you could just easily obtain that with a filter or something. This is exactly the feeling that I got from that. So there's no clarity, there's no focus on the lower part and the upper part, and there is a lot of clarity in the middle. It's not always that way, but what is always present in all of the cards is some elements are out of focus and some elements are in focus. And I don't understand that, because it's not a matter of, you know, in some cases these wings look like the creator or the painter or whomever was doing the design of this card actually kind of lost their patience and went, okay, that's enough, let's move on, because I put a lot of details in the figure, but then this one is in the background, so it doesn't get as much attention. And I feel that you can definitely see that in all of the cards. This card, for example, and I don't know if I can show you because you really have to zoom in. This card is really beautiful. It's it's a world card. It's a very beautiful card. However, because there is so much difference between the way in which this, I'm guessing the moon of the sun, is rendered and the angel, the dark angel, is rendered, it's actually very conflicting for me. I struggle, and it's such a pity because I really love everything about this deck. I really love the dark mood of the deck. Look at this Five of Cups, for example, or this Ten of Wands. I love the theme because, you know, during that month it's something that I really enjoy using. And this deck is going nowhere in the sense that I still love it. I still use it that time of the year. I got it back for a reason and it's not going anywhere ever again. However, every time I use it, I cannot help it but focus my attention on the fact that there is so much that is not detailed on the wings again of this angel, and the opposite, you know, on the face. But then again, we go back to the clothes, and the clothes are also out of focus or not detailed. Or this card, for example, this card is even worse because it almost looks as if it was a collage. And so my mind goes, oh, okay, is that a collage? And then I'm thinking, no, it's not a collage. So I know that this sounds like I'm being very picky. I'm just telling you the truth on how, you know, it really feels like cards like this have taken longer to produce than cards like this, because simply there's a lot more detail in this card than there are on this one. And I just wonder, why? Is that symbolic? Is there a reason behind it? Is it just because? Or maybe the author, the creator, or again, look at the difference in these two. I mean, this one is perfect. If all of the cards were like this, I would love this deck. I have no problem at all in using it. But then again, you see the Tower card, and it's, you know, there are no details, for example, in the cloud. In any case, I'm just being, you know, super, oh, again, okay, I need to stop. But what I mean is, it's a beautiful deck. There's a reason why it's an underdog deck in my collection, and the reason is because I find the inconsistencies in the rendering of the cards a bit upsetting for me. What I'm going to do, because pairing it up with an oracle deck is very important for me, and these are the backs, by the way, really, really beautiful. And let me just zoom out a little bit again. So I am going to try and pair it up with an oracle deck that hopefully will make me want to pay attention to this deck again. Let's see. So the oracle that I'm going to use for this deck is the Victoria Frances Oracle cards. I think that this is an older edition and it's now called Gothic Oracle, but I'm not entirely sure. In any case, I'll always make sure to put the link to these decks in the description box below, just in case you want to check them out or you want to buy them. This is also a Los Carabeo deck, but it's one of their Oracle productions, so it is different when it comes to the quality as well, or at least different when it comes to the cardstock, which is kind of, you know, semi-gloss, catches the light a little bit. I want to see whether, you know, pairing these two up together will make me want to use the Tarot of the Dark Angels more. I think it might work. I mean, I see immediately that we have these similarities between the borders, but also the decoration on the borders, for example. And these two are definitely darker decks. Also, you know, the Victoria Frances Oracle card is obviously related to the Gothic and the vampire and that kind of theme. I love the fact that these three characters look like they are the same person, but in three different aspects. So I'm already starting to think that I may want to use these again together. Definitely see the same expression, also the same tilting of the head. So obviously this invites me to read directionality between these cards. Now the Victoria Frances, or at least the version that I have, does not have any keywords, as you can see plainly, which is a bit of a deal breaker for me. But this deck is so beautiful, it is so freakingly beautiful, that I actually don't mind, because it is one of those decks that when used right, and by right I mean also with the right tarot deck, actually gives you a lot to think about. It gives you a lot of let's say that it triggers your intuition in such a way that it determines a message, it creates a message, even though there is no keyword to help you do that. But keywords are sometimes very generic, and you know, that's even worse than not having no keywords at all. In this case, I really let myself just, you know, look at the card and find what my mind recognizes as a message behind the images represented. I love this card. This is Venice, obviously, with the Bridge of Rialto. It's very famous. If you've been to Venice, there's signs everywhere that will point out either to San Marco, St. Mark's Square, or to Rialto Bridge. And I think that, you know, knowing Venice as much as I do, this is, to me, it's calling upon the sadness of winter, of the winter months, in which you have the fog, you know, you have the carnival with all of these masks, but you also have that kind of sadness because of the gray, because of the fact that there's not much light, and also because of, you know, the vitality that you see in Venice for the carnival. If you go for Mardi Gras, it's going to be suicide in Venice nowadays because of the tourists, but you just have to go the day after and there's absolutely no one left. And that is the sadness of the day after Mardi Gras. And I see that here in the between the Five of Pentacles and the Two of Swords, and that really creates the message for me. It creates a message of, you know, the Five of Pentacles is after the consolidation of the Four of Pentacles. You just realize that you've been left with nothing. You've been left out in the cold of the winter months on your own or with little company. And what you've remained is the sadness that follows a big consolidation, in this case, in the case of the Four of Coins. And here you feel like you're stuck, because the Two of Swords, that's exactly that kind of feeling. You don't have enough information. Most of the time the Two of Swords present a figure that is actually blindfolded. In the case it's not. But it really tells you that you have a decision to make, because after you've been left with nothing, you have to make a decision on what to do, where to move, where to go forward to. So it's a very intuitive kind of reading, but at the same time, I feel like it is definitely a message that is guided, you know, and I'm just listening again, I'm just listening to it. So these two together, I really love them. I really love pairing them up. And as I thought, so this is just an experiment because I haven't tried this before filming. I'm actually going through these two together, you know, to see whether the Oracle can kind of give me a more motivation to use the tarot. And I haven't done that before filming. I, of course, use these two together, but for very specific purposes during the month of Halloween. But not because I was asking the Oracle to give me more attention, to ask me to rekindle my passion for the tarot deck. But it's working. It's absolutely working. And I really like these two together. So that was the tarot, the Dark Angels Tarot, which is another underdog deck in my collection. Another underdog deck in my collection is the Omega Land Tarot deck and card game. This is a publication by US Games from, I believe, a few years ago. It is unfortunately out of print, and it's one of those decks created by Joe Boginski, and game by Karen Boginski. I believe that there's been a lot of requests for this deck to be reprinted, but for some reason it's one of those decks that unfortunately, it is a mass market deck, so everyone thinks I have time, I don't get it right now because it's a mass market deck. It's not like it's an indie deck, so it's going to go out of print. I'll always be able to buy it, and then it goes out of print and it becomes a sought after deck because everyone wants it and they can't find it. So this is the story behind this deck. This is an underdog deck in my collection, and the reason, I know the reason, it's very simple. It's a very simple reason. It's because it's also a game, and it does feel like a game, a card game, whenever you look at, for example, the numbers, the big numbers. So you already have the titles at the bottom of the card, but for some reason they also put them at the top. And I don't know, I keep on thinking there was no need for that. It reminds me that this deck can also be used as a game, as a card game. It's a very interesting card game, by the way. If you don't know this deck, have a look. Obviously, as I said, it is out of print. I don't know how hard it is to find. I actually used to have 2 copies of this deck, and one I rehomed it. I'm not going to rehome this one because at the end of the day, let's not I don't want to be misunderstood. I actually like these decks. I call them the underdog because for some reason, and it's generally my fault, but they're not used as much as I would love to use them. And so I'm trying to make myself find a new motivation in order to use them by looking at them, reminding myself of the reason why I used to love them so much, or the reason why I had a very specific place in my collection for these decks. And this one is the dystopian future, your zombie / survivalist kind of deck, because of course it's set in a world of the future, not too far future, but it is a future where everything has collapsed, civilization is not the way it used to be, and you have to survive. So if you're a gamer, think about The Last of Us, and you'll know what I mean about this deck. The Last of Us reminds me so much of this deck every time I look at it, because even the characters, this could be Joel, for example. I think this could be Joel, but in any case, it really does remind me of that. There's obviously no zombies, which is kind of odd because that's the one thing that is actually missing in this deck. But I believe it was because they didn't necessarily want to be limited by the choice of the catastrophe, that befell Earth, and it led humanity to be a bit of a survivalist, a bit of a in this dystopian kind of society. I think that if they chose zombies, or if they chose, in the case of The Last of Us, for example, it's a virus. Sorry, it's not a virus. It's a bacteria. What is it? It's a fungus, actually. Sorry. I know that there's a difference, but in my head they're all the same. So it was a fungus that took over, people, infected them, and making them basically lose their mind and also their human aspect in many cases. There's different types of monsters. But that was The Last of Us. In this case, we don't have that. We don't necessarily see the reason why everything went downhill. We can imagine what it is, but we don't necessarily see. It's not really pointed out. We do see a lot of weapons. Almost everyone has a weapon. So we do assume that there is hostility, as you can see. But it's mostly humans shooting other humans, as you can see in this case. And that also happened in The Last of Us, because, the funny thing is that, okay, you live in a world that has gone downhill and society has broken down and everything is basically desperate. You would think that humans would actually unite all together and try and fight a common enemy, but that is not the case. No, they're also fighting each other, as you do. Anyway, so this is the Omega Land Tarot, and it is a bit of an underdog deck for me, simply because I tend to see the playing cards game behind the cards rather than the tarot deck. And so every time that I do a spread, and now I'm just gonna grab 3 random cards. Every time I do a spread, I can't help but thinking about what the strategy will be of the game. You know, if we look at the game, what is the strategy behind? How are we going to use it? Is the value, you know, there is a value assigned to the cards. So what is the total value? What are the points, etc. Rather than focusing on the usual meanings that I read in a tarot deck. I think that in this case, I may have to make a decision whether I want to use it as a playing card deck or, you know, as a tarot deck. And then I need to really focus on how to achieve that, how to bring my attention onto the cards as tarot. That's something that has not, I don't know, again, I'm asking you, if you're watching this video, if you have this deck, how do you use it? Have you tried playing the game? Do you prefer it as a tarot? And how do you use it? What's the space of this tarot in your collection? And last but not least, there's another oracle deck. This time is the I Ching of Love. This is also a Los Scarabeo, yes, deck. However, it's got 64 cards. Obviously because the I Ching is 64 cards. However, what I want to say first and foremost is that the reason why they call it I Ching of Love is the reason why it's an underdog deck in my collection. I tend to overlook this deck because of the title. I think it's a very unfortunate title because I personally believe that even though there are references to, let's say, feelings in this deck, it's actually a very good oracle. And so if we move past that, and I'm already telling you the way in which I want to rekindle my passion for this deck, but there you have it. If we want to move past that title, we're actually going to find that this is a very, very intense and powerful deck. Because I tend to feel that everything that is labeled as love, it's only used, it's very limited, it's only used for a very specific purpose, which is relationship readings. However, I can assure you that when you use this oracle deck for any other type of readings, it's actually really good. So yes, of course, there are cards like, you know, if you see Venus, of course, there's a card called Falling in Love. But not, so the Under Pressure card, for example, doesn't necessarily, yes, there is a heart, but Under Pressure could apply to anything. So it's something that a new beginning could apply to anything. And they, of course, they put the heart almost in many cards, you will see that. But that is just a symbol. Uniqueness, for example. That's so beautiful. And I really believe that this deck has been an underdog in my collection for such a long time. I even thought about rehoming it at a certain point because I just did not find a way to use it. I couldn't really find myself, I couldn't really see myself using it and finding a place, a special place, a unique place for this deck in my collection. When at a certain point I was asking myself, if I had to pair it up with a tarot deck, which deck would I use? And I thought maybe the Ferenc Pinter tarot would be, you know, a good match for this deck. So let's have a look. Because as I said before, I haven't tried this before filming, so this is all new. And it's something that I'm really interested to see if it works or not. Let's have a look. Okay, so here we are. I don't know what you think. Let me know in the comments below. I'll be very interested. I believe that there is something going on between these two decks. There are similarities. There's a conversation that is taking place. We don't necessarily see, let's say, the same symbols. They're rather different, but something about the art style and something about the colors used by both the decks tells me that there's something there. There's definitely something there. and I just want to have a look whether the vibes actually match or if we're looking at two completely different decks. So we got Suffering between the Three of Cups and Judgment. We've got No in Love between the High Priestess and the Five of Wands. We have the Obstacle between the Nine of Wands and the Five of Swords. Definitely resonating there, definitely something to be read as a message. We got Sex between the Devil and the Seven of Pentacles. There's another, there are links here. I can definitely see these two decks bonding. Family between the Ten of Swords and the Four of Swords. Wow, it's very powerful, it's very intense. I mean, obviously there's a few cards, we do have 64 cards, so there will be a few cards that are just necessarily linked to the, let's say, the thematic of love. Happiness is to love, be in love, etc. But I mean, tarot decks also have that concept. If we think about the Suit of Cups, for example, there's a lot of feelings referring back to love, and sometimes is the couple's love, sometimes is the friendship, sometimes the love for the community, sometimes is the love as a redemption, for example. So we do have that going back and forth between the cards when we look at them this way. I don't know though. I mean, if you're watching this, let me know what you think. Let me know what your suggestions are. Would there be a different deck that you think would pair up much better with this Itching of Love oracle that I don't know about? Because I would love to see, you know, how to reignite this kind of interest that I have in this deck, because it is, after all, a really good deck, and there's no point not to use it. So again, I'm just going to repeat myself, but I wanted to be very clear. These are not decks that I don't like. These are decks that I do indeed like, and many of them I actually use them a lot because they had a very special place in my collection. However, for some reason, now it's almost as if I don't feel, you know, I don't feel the attention, I don't feel like paying attention to them anymore. And I just want to find a way in order to bring them back to the routine of my decks. So that was it for today. Thank you so much for staying with me till the end of this video. Again, please check out if you're interested in my membership program. It is so very exciting for me to be connecting with you in many other different ways. So more to come. Have a great day.